Okay, for me personally, if I was going to get one chronograph under $500, I would go with the Bulova Lunar Pilot. But if I was going to get a second, I'd get the Hemel HFT20, which is exactly the watch we're going to take a look at today. Let's check it out. Hey everybody, this is Dave. Welcome back to Just the Watch, and today we are going to be taking a look at a watch from a micro brand called Hemel. This is the HFT20, the VK64 Mecha-quartz configuration that they've got. So what this is a pilot style chronograph with a Seiko Mecha-quartz movement inside of it. It comes in at 42 millimeter diameter with a case shape that wears really well on the wrist. And top-notch specifications across the board. You're getting 100 meters of water resistance, sapphire crystal, Swiss Superluminova, pretty much the works. And there's a lot that I like about this watch. The design is just really clean and crisp. It definitely has a kind of really tough military aesthetic. It feels like a pilot-style watch, which is one of my favorite kinds of watches. You're getting that big onion crown on there, and then just a really clear dial layout that is, so reminiscent of some of the best classic Fliegers out there. And to top it all off, they offer it in two different bezel options, one of which being a stainless steel 12-hour GMT bezel, which is probably my favorite kind of bezel on a watch. It's just so versatile. So I think you get a lot more bang for your buck out of a GMT bezel than out of a standard 60-minute timing bezel. And a GMT bezel is interesting. I think there's one trick in particular that I'll show you when we get into the more detailed views of the watch that gives it an advantage even over a dedicated GMT hand. Anyways, with all that said, let's go ahead and jump into the watch and take a look at it. Okay, so here's the Hemel HFT20 series military style chronograph. Now, this is a watch I've been dying to check out for a long time. So particularly this month when we were supposed to be looking at chronographs for Watch of the Month, I reached out to Hemel, and Marvin over there was kind enough to send this one in for review. So big thanks to him for that. Dimensions and specifications, you are looking at a 42 millimeter diameter case, 49 millimeters lug to lug. Getting a thickness of about 13 millimeters, 20 millimeter straps, and this guy really is a strap monster, so you have a lot of great strap options there. I'll show you a couple of them later on in the review. 100 meters of water resistance on top of that, so really tough watch, and pretty decent lume as well for a pilot style watch. At first glance, the case seems very simple, but the more you look at it, you can see that it just has this really kind of beautiful flowing curves, gives it kind of a really organic look. And it's just a brushing all the way around, which again is very simple but very well done. And the way the brushing flows from horizontal to vertical over these lugs, it's just really, really beautifully done. Another benefit to that is it's going to be a little bit less likely to pick up scratches than if you had polished surfaces. The lugs have a really great curve to them that helps it to just wear really well on the wrist. Having 20 millimeter lugs on a 42 millimeter watch gives it kind of a little bit more of an elegant look there, which I think looks really great with the overall design of the watch. The strap that they're giving you is a very thick, nice genuine leather strap. I think it's about 4 millimeters thick, so very well built. Nice, two rivet design on each side of the strap, so kind of a classic pilot style strap that should give you a lot of good wear out of this strap. And it just fits the character of the watch really well. You're getting a signed crown and this kind of crosshatch work on the pushers, so just all of the details are really well done. There's so much to appreciate about what they've put into this watch. And overall, the build quality feels very solid. You're getting a 120 click unidirectional bezel, which again, this is something they give you the option of having a 60-minute timing bezel or this GMT bezel. Typically with a GMT bezel, you'd rather have a bidirectional, but it's understandable that they would do that since they're offering it in either option. Again, sapphire crystal, 100 meters of water resistance. It does not have a screw down crown. It's just a push-pull crown, but you are still getting the full 100 meters of water resistance with that. And inside, you are getting a Seiko Mecha-quartz movement. So what a Mecha-quartz movement is, so this is a quartz watch. It's battery powered. It has the accuracy of a quartz watch, but the chronograph part of the watch, so this chronograph hand that's moving around, you can see it's sweeping very smoothly. There's actually a mechanical chronograph module on top of this battery-powered quartz watch. So the battery-powered quartz timekeeping drives this mechanical chronograph movement. So you are getting an actual hybrid of mechanical and quartz movements put together. Another thing that you're getting with the Mecha-quartz movement is just the tactile feeling. So if you've ever used a quartz chronograph, when you start and stop the chronograph, a lot of times it just feels a little bit spongy, like you're pushing a button on a keyboard or something like that. Whereas, the old school chronographs, mechanical chronographs, they would have a real tactile click to them, and you can feel that in this one, when you do it. It's definitely, there's something mechanical happening in there. The other cool thing about that is the reset on a mechanical chronograph is this kind of instant flyback that is so satisfying and so fun to use. I mean, you can just kind of keep clicking it all day long and resetting it. And that instant snapback reset is something that you just don't get out of a normal quartz chronograph movement. So it's just a really fun touch that really helps it to feel like it's not a quartz-powered watch. Feels a lot like a mechanical one. And this one not having a running second hand, so that's another thing to note on the dial, the layout here. You've got 60-minute subdial here for counting the chronograph minutes, and then over here you have a 24-hour subdial. So there is no running second hand. So if the chronograph is stationary, then there is no movement at all on the watch, which is a little bit disconcerting at first, but it also means that there is no real indication that this is a quartz watch. There's no ticking to remind you that this is not a mechanical or automatic timepiece. Now, the layout and the legibility of this watch is outstanding. You can see how detailed the printing is, both with that second track going around the outside. You can see that it's divided into 1/5 of a second, and that is a functional thing. That's not an aesthetic thing. So this chronograph hand, it ticks at 5 times per second. So if you're able to slow this down and zoom in and look at it, you could see that you can count each of those 1/5 of a second movement as the chronograph hand goes around, enabling you to actually use it to time things incredibly accurately if you need to. So even though this doesn't have a second, an extra subdial to track like fractions of a second, on the main subdial or on the main dial, you can actually read, how many fifths of a second you stopped it on to get a very accurate reading if you needed to. And then additionally, the 60-minute subdial that tracks the chronograph minutes has each individual minute marked out so that you can read it down to the minute very easily. I've seen a lot of these chronographs, when they do the 60-minute dial, they only mark every 5 minutes. And it makes it so frustrating because, if you're having a chronograph, you want to be able to read it accurately down to the minute. So this one allows you to do that very easily, very cleanly. So just a great overall layout and design. But overall, everything is very easy to read on this watch, which is, one of the hallmarks of a good pilot's watch. Now, again, this does come in 2 options. You can get it either with a GMT bezel or with a ceramic 60-minute sort of dive time bezel. I went with the GMT bezel because GMT bezels are far better and they're awesome, and that's just the way it is. Let me show you what I love about a GMT bezel. So this one, I know what. I've already done this before, but I know that if I move the triangle, which normally marks 12 o'clock, if I move it over to 4 o'clock, that's going to read me out California time. So I live in Japan. I've got this set to Japan time now. And now when I move this over here, I've got this GMT bezel is now reading California time, which for me, that's actually easier to read than having a 24-hour GMT hand. If you had a separate GMT hand on there, you'd have to read it in 24-hour time. You'd have to then kind of convert it in your head. So if it was like 17, then you kind of know that's okay. So that's 5 p.m., which is practical because it gives you the AM PM. But usually I know the AM PM, so I don't need that. Anyways, the way I would read it on here. So now I can see that it is about 10:45 at night here in Japan while I'm recording this. But I can see that it's it would be 6:45 in America. So I know that's 6:45 a.m. in California. So I can tell the time very easily there, which is just a great feature to be able to do that. And for me, again, this is easier to read the second time zone on this because you're just looking at that main hour hand and it's immediately telling you in 12-hour time what time it is in the second time zone. So it's great for that. The other huge benefit that this has over a typical GMT hand, with a typical GMT hand, it's great about telling you what time it is right now. But if you want to figure out what time it's going to be, say I wanted to see what time it was going to be tomorrow morning at like 9 a.m. in Japan, what time it was going to be in California. If I wanted to, if I'm thinking, okay, so I want to get up tomorrow morning and talk to someone, what time is it going to be at 9 a.m. tomorrow over in California? Well, I can actually do that looking at the dial right now. So if I look at 9 a.m. over here, I can see that's lined up with 5. Okay, so if I look at the 9 on the main dial, which would be here, I can see that the GMT is reading 5, so I can instantly tell that it's going to be 5 p.m. in California when it's 9 a.m. here. If I wanted to look, an hour or two ahead, if I wanted to look and say, okay, so if I'm going to be up until 1 a.m., I would know that at 1 a.m. it's going to be 9 a.m. in America or in California. And that's something that you can't really do on a typical GMT watch unless you have the 24-hour bezel and you use that third time zone to kind of, line it up like that. You can work around it on some of them. But this one is just so easy and so quick to be able to do that and just have it already set up automatically. It's so practical for reading a second time zone. Additionally, you can easily use this as a timing bezel. You can flip this over to, mark the minutes. And so, you move that over like you would a typical timing bezel. You've got it on the minute hand, and now it's tracking minutes. And, it's on 12-hour scale, but it's pretty easy to read that, right? So say I set it, it's back here. I'd be able to tell, okay, so it's been almost 15 minutes have elapsed on this because I know 3 is 15 because I can read a watch. So it's great for that. You can also use it for tracking hours. If you want to track something really long, you can line up with the hour hand, and then you could see how many hours have elapsed. Give you kind of a rough time just to keep track of something like that, which can also be useful from time to time. So I think that this 12-hour bezel for me is just so much more useful than a 60-minute timing bezel. Again, especially if you have a second time zone that you want to track. So just tons of functionality packed into this watch. Okay, next up, let's go ahead and take a look at a Lume shot and see how this thing looks in the dark. So this is a 2-hour time lapse, and the Hemel is second from the right on this list. And you can see that the Lume is good. Most of the other watches on this list are divers, and even still the Hemel holds its own, particularly when it comes to the hand brightness. In fact, its hands were brighter than my SWC diver, the Yema, and the Spinnaker Flus chronograph. Markers were a little bit on the weaker side, but again, overall, I think the Lume is good. It's very functional, it's easy to use in the dark, and it does last a pretty substantially long time. It's not going to compete with the likes of Seiko or some of these really high-powered divers out there, but it is, a pilot's watch, not a dive watch. And again, I would say that the Lume is good Lume. Okay, so let's talk about the pros and the cons of the Hemel HFT20. I think this watch could easily qualify as my ultimate everyday watch because of that 100-meter water resistance, because of the excellent build quality in it, because of the functionality that you get out of having a really functional chronograph to time things, and then also having that GMT bezel to keep track of a second time zone. It covers almost every feature that I need, and I love the style on top of it. So it's just overall just a really great watch, and one that I just really love wearing, and it's got a lot to offer. However, I don't think the watch is completely perfect. There are some things that I would like to see tweaked or changed a little bit, and yeah, let's run through what some of the potential drawbacks of this watch might be. All right, number one is that 24-hour subdial on the right side of the watch. I would have preferred something different there, and that's largely due to I think the movement that they use. So I don't know how much of an option they have to change it, but I would have much preferred to see either a running second hand. It's kind of weird the watch doesn't have a running second hand. It is a little bit jarring, and sometimes I was especially when I first got out of the box, I wasn't sure if it was running or not because I couldn't see anything ticking on the watch. So, but even if it wasn't going to be a running second hand, maybe like a date wheel would have been cool, like a 31-day date wheel instead of a 24-hour hour hand. For me, the date is one of the features that I use often on a daily wear watch. So overall, the fact that this watch does not have a date is, for me, something that's a bit of a drawback. I would have preferred to see a date implemented somehow. But again, I don't know if they could have done much because they're sort of locked into that Seiko Mecha-quartz movement. Another drawback, kind of along with the movement, is that the chronograph second hand on mine was very slightly misaligned. When it resets back to 0, I think it's just kind of a hair to the left of where it should be. But this seems to be an issue on a number of Mecha-quartz watches that I've seen. I think it's just they're a little bit more particular, and unlike most quartz watches, if you get a quartz chronograph that's not Mecha-quartz, typically you can adjust that second hand by pulling out the crown and holding down the pushers, and you can realign it and calibrate it. With the Mecha-quartz, you typically can't do that, and on this one you couldn't really do it either. So it's just sort of just slightly misaligned, and that's something you just kind of got to live with. But again, this is, I've gotten Mecha-quartz watches from other different brands that have kind of the same problem, so I think this is sort of an issue that you can get with those movements. And the final con is that the GMT bezel is unidirectional, which typically, if it was going to be a true GMT bezel, it should be bidirectional so that you can more easily adjust that to different time zones. As it is, you have to spin it completely around as as like it's a diving bezel, because this is a watch that they offer in 2 configurations, so it's completely logical from a cost saving standpoint that they would only that way they're only having to change the bezel instead of the mechanism behind it. But still, it's a minor drawback there and something worth noting. Now let's talk a little bit about the price. So this one, again, it comes in at $450, which is on the upper end of what you would pay for, a Mecha-quartz chronograph. Again, for me personally, as someone who focuses typically on affordable watches, this is getting into the upper end of my price range. And there are a lot of options in this price range. But that said, looking at the watch and the build quality and all that it offers, the design, the style, the toughness, the components, I think it is worth it at that price. And again, this is something that, for me, it's one of the best chronographs you can get under $500. It's, again, a lot of that might be personal to me. It's just like one of my favorites, and I really like it. It's something that I've kind of been eyeing for a long time, so I'm really happy that I finally got one in on the channel and I'm able to take a look at it. And particularly if you are interested in the Bulova Lunar Pilot, this is definitely a different watch than that, but it wears a lot better than the Lunar Pilot. The Lunar Pilot is much bigger, much flatter. This one is a much more manageable size, and it has more curved lugs. So it just wears a lot better than the Lunar Pilot does. And for a lot of people, I think it's going to be an easier to wear watch for many people out there. So I think if you see this watch and the design really appeals to you and you have the money to spend, I think it's definitely worth it at that price point. But let me know what you guys think, and be sure to leave any questions or comments that you have down below. Always love hearing from you guys. And also, if you are new to the channel, if you are interested in budget watch collecting and you haven't already subscribed, definitely ask that you do. I do a lot of reviews. We talk about different topics about budget watch collecting, some tips and things. And then I also typically do a watch of the month video where we examine a certain category of watches every month. And this month in June, we were supposed to look at chronographs, which is why I got this watch in for review. However, for that roundup, I also ordered a Siegel 1963 chronograph off of AliExpress to include, and international shipping being what it is right now, it's taking a lot longer to come in than I thought. So I'm kind of holding off on the chronograph watch of the month until that comes in. So hopefully it'll come in soon and we can get to it. But for now, that's kind of what's going on. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.